Greetings out there! It is I, Tantus Naramathicum, your Lord, here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more. If you're joining me live on Twitch, hello Twitch! Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoy the show. If you're joining me on YouTube a couple days later when this goes up, after being recorded live, hey, welcome! Thanks for joining me anyway, and thanks for learning about this stuff and being interested. Today we're going to continue our diving into Pathfinder-related topics, especially since these are being recorded/streamed in spooked-over time of year. Something a little spooky. Haunts. We're going to be going into both the mechanical side of haunts and the lore side of the haunts to a degree. Because haunts are a little bit of both in a way, and are very unique and individualistic, and we'll kind of talk about it. But my question for today, if you're joining me live for comments, or on the YouTube side, if you want to put a comment in the description of that one, is what's your encounters with haunts? Have you used them if you're a GM, or have you encountered very interesting ones if you're a player? That's my question for you. But as usual, as we get started here, I do like to shout out, well, sources that I can kind of say for giving some basic information of haunts. And there are some very interesting ones today. I will start out with throwing out here, of course, The Haunting of Harrowstone, the first adventure of Carrion Crown. I'm just going to preface this with a note. I've said plenty of stuff over the years on discussing tabletop and my role-playing shows and a lot of places about my opinions on Carrion Crown. Haunting of Harrowstone is one of the better adventures in it, and honestly, it introduces a very interesting system of haunts. This is where they came. They did expand on them in the Occult Adventures book, and in 2nd edition, Tomorrow Must Burn kind of gave us a 2nd edition version of haunts. So they do exist in both 1st and 2nd edition. So, interestingly enough, this looks like a ghost, but it's a haunt. Both of these are, I chose images to show off the haunts today that were mostly a little bit more ghostly looking, but the idea is that they are more not an actual ghost. Okay, so let's talk about lore side what haunts are, and then we'll talk mechanically in Pathfinder 1st edition at least what haunts are. I'm going to tell you I'm not as familiar with the mechanical side of haunts in 2nd edition. I haven't dove into that really much, and that's probably something to do, especially because it's been a little less introduced in 2nd edition. So maybe we'll talk. But we'll probably talk about that a little bit, but I'll kind of stick to the 1st edition form of it for now. That might be a future thing here to kind of talk about 2nd edition haunts. Well, I can get a little bit of information. It is in the core rulebook. Alright. So, they're manifestations of spirits. They're not quite a true undead, not quite a ghost, but they were created through anguish, despair, pain. They're weak is the big thing, too. That weakness means they cannot manifest into something like a ghost or another type of undead, but they form this almost trap-like hazard. And I think that's the best way to describe it. On the mechanical side, it's a hazard. It's a trap that you're going to encounter, but it's supernatural, not physical. Their origins are oftentimes dire. Many are, though, harmful or lethal to those that encounter them. The thing about haunts themselves is they are not really aligned anyway. Some of them could be considered something more neutral. They just do their thing to whoever encounters them. And depending on how you interact with one, some can actually even be helpful. Not Father Charlotte, for sure. Haunts can be destroyed, but they will manifest again after enough time. To end a haunt permanently is basically to put the haunt to rest. You basically have to have a particular condition and appease the restless spirits that are behind it. That way you can get rid of the haunt for good. Similar to how kind of ghosts you kind of have to get rid of. There are some creatures connected to haunts. There's the Frightful Haunter, an incorporeal undead, created from benevolent bugbears capable of splitting off part of their beings to form haunts. Ghosts are oftentimes connected with haunts. They function a lot in the same ways of creation and functions, and they do rejuvenate from destruction unless steps are taken to put them to rest. Think of haunts as lesser ghosts. They're not that same kind of power. Another creature that had some connections to haunts was the remnants of Barrel's Eye, Battles Thrun, his spectral remains were basically creating and drawing out powers from haunts. And soulbound ruins also exist. They don't manifest as individual haunts. Spirits merge into a singular force that imbues the entire structure. Now, there's a huge list of haunts. I can go through some here that are more generic. There are those that do exist that are very unique. Father Charlotte in here is a unique haunt that I'm showing off a picture of here. The next one I'll show is another unique haunt. Both of them are from the Haunting Power Stone and are major haunts in that. But the Haunting Power Stone does have a large amount of haunts. Something like a cold spot exists. They manifest from victims of violence who can't have enough strength to be true ghosts. They're stationary. Unlike most haunts which are stationary, they roam within their home structure, basically manifesting as bone-chilling cold that could kill the ill-prepared. They're put to rest by using typically heat metal on an object or area of manifestation. Other kind of ones that are very generic that you might show up or like wrapping spirits. The weakest, most common of it. They basically have corrosive knocks, bumps that come from the walls, floors, ceilings, other surfaces. Basically trying to instill fear in people. If some haunts that are temporarily destroyed, not permanently ones, can actually manifest as wrapping spirits while they're rejuvenating. Because they are such a lesser version, much more powerful haunts. You could establish communication with the knockers to gather information, and typically they're put to rest by interring certain moral remains. There's the ones like slamming portals, slamming like and closing doors, windows, other methods of entries. They can bar retreat from deadlier hazards, can prevent you from going farther. Sprinkling holy water in the other area usually gets rid of that spirit's influence. Other such ones, just by name, are baleful manifestations, choking hands, ectoplasmic miasma, the fall of House of Haunts, which is a location with a lot of ghastly whispers, Gengganger, headless horseman, hounds of Bral's Eye, connected to Dracovin, a mad monk, orbs, phantom bells, shrouded ladies, and spectral carriages. Some of these are a little bit more particular, some of these are a little bit more generic, and again, like, a lot of adventures that have haunts will just have unique haunts to them. Sometimes we'll use a lot of them. A bunch of these were introduced in the Haunting Power Stone for the more generic side of things. Let's talk about mechanically haunts, too, and we'll show off the Piper of Ilmarsh here, who's another haunt from Haunting Power Stone. Spoilers if you haven't done the Haunting Power Stone. So, originally, again, they were introduced in Haunting Power Stone, expanded a little bit upon in the Occult Adventures book. The idea is they're very trap, mechanical. If I'm going to talk about a haunt, I would describe that it has a maximum area based on its challenge rating, because it has a challenge rating. We'll start with first edition's versions of the haunt as we kind of talk about that. It's triggered, it manifests at initiative rank 10 in a surprise round. Someone in the proximity can try to notice it during the surprise round, detecting some kind of signal that something's going to happen. It has kind of like an AC, it has initiative, it has hit points. Its AC is going to be 10 if there's an attack against it. It has hit points. Basically, a haunt statistically has its CR. Of course, XP and ward from the CR, much like traps. It will sometimes have an alignment, an area that it fills up. Again, usually CR times 5 feet is the normal one. That's the maximum, but it can be different. A caster level, if it has, for dispelling effects, with spell magic that it has, or determining spell effects for abilities that it's doing. Its notice, which is the skill required to notice it, the DC during the surprise round. Its hit points for resolving positive energy damage against it, because the only thing that really normal damages it is positive energy unless it has a weakness. Basically, if it has a weakness, it can be damaged by something else. Otherwise, you need positive energy. Reduce it to 0. Weaknesses do exist, though. It can be anything from being tricked by hide from undead, damaged by something other than positive energy. Triggers are the conditions in which the haunt triggers. It has a reset, which means that if it's destroyed, it's reset after a certain period of time. Otherwise, the amount of time before the haunt can do its thing again. Until it's permanently destroyed, it will reset after this time period. The effect it gives is listed, and of course, how to destroy it. There's an entire chart. Why don't I copy and show off this page here for the... Thanks, motorcycle. The chart here in the book. No ads. No ads. There you go. Here up on the PSFRD D20, it's also on the Archives of Nethys. Here is the basic chart for figuring out CR if you're designing it, and some steps for it, you know, for designing your own haunt. Gives you an idea of how to build it. It's very similar to a lot of trap building. I'm not going to lie. It's a supernatural trap is the easiest way to think of a haunt. There's a little bit more to it, but if you're thinking in that basic way, you get it. Now, communicating and investigating haunts in order to find out how to destroy them. That's an entire thing. And there was clarification to haunts that occurred in the Occult Adventures we're going to talk about in a second. But let's talk about the investigation first, because that's a mechanical part about this. So, you have to attempt to communicate with a haunt to discover the actions necessary to put it to rest. Effectively, a GM could treat all neutralized haunts, reduces 0 hit points as a CR1 wrapping spirit until they reset. So they retain enough ectoplasmic fortitude to linger in an area, can attempt to convey their needs to the living, can be still frightening and stuff like that. But you could get a code of yeses and nos to kind of do with that. And messages can be formed with that, with a linguistics check, with DC equal to 15 plus its original CR. And it's usually cryptic, unreliable, never conveying knowledge it didn't know in its life. And it will behave according to the haunt's original alignment. Malevolent spirits would deny themselves a chance at final rest. Talking boards plan checks, basically. There is in Haunting Powerstone, there's a spirit plan check. Can allow communication with spirits. Increases the linguistics to decipher, and amount of words per minute. So you'd use a spirit plan chat, or try to communicate with the wrapping spirits. There's opportunities to it. So when we clarified haunts, we also included some things like holy water is a potential weapon against haunts other than positive energy. This was specified. And it does damage to a haunt directly, or splash damage in a radius kind of things too. It added additional haunt elements in Occult Adventures. So, secondary and primary effects are things that exist for a haunt that, even if the primary effect is some kind of fear or mental effect that your characters might be immune from, it's the connection to the secondary effect that the characters could still witness. They give an example of a spectral vermin haunt should be able to manifest a visible ghostly phantom of the skeletal rat swarm to those immune to the effect and beyond its range, even though the haunt's primary effect does not affect those PCs. So effectively, you could still see the haunt and what's going on, even if it's like fear or mind-affecting abilities you're immune to. This was a clarification in Occult Adventures, because they don't really say that kind of stuff. And this is fixing it a little bit in first edition version haunts. We're still in first edition here. And I will tell you the rules in here, if you want to take the Occult Adventures book, The Haunting Powerstone, those are 2 books to really look up the rules. But the PSFR D20 and Archives of Nethys do a pretty good job. The Archives of Nethys version from, original first edition do a pretty good job of giving a lot of things. And they also did things like item-bound, possessing haunts, chained haunts, seances and spirit communications. They added rules for that. So really, Occult Adventures added a lot of variety, especially if you're going to use a lot of haunts. If you're going to just use, 1 haunt or maybe 2 in your adventure, you don't have to go very deep. Really, maybe just keep the wrapping and communicate with that one to get rid of it, stuff like that. You don't have to go to, the spin-offs of speed of communication or stuff like that. If you're going to do something like Haunting of Harrowstone, which has a crap ton of haunts in there, and then the entire Carrying Crown has a bunch of haunts, then you might consider a little bit more. Now, haunts in 2nd edition, I can pull this out here, my 2nd edition book, on page 232. Haunt is a trait. It is basically connected with a hazard. So it's using the basic hazard rules in 2nd edition that kind of come along with your average hazard in 2nd edition, but it's got the haunt trait, so it's a little unique. So, yeah. So, I think I may or may not have hit hazard rules in all my talking about 2nd editions, but they made it actually a lot simpler, in a way, to work with the haunts in 2nd edition. So, I think there are probably more details to be had. Just trying to fire. They've got a lot of haunts listed that we can talk about here. They don't talk as much about getting rid of them the same way and stuff like that. It's very interesting because they make them more of a hazard in 2nd edition. So they kind of simplify haunts. They do mention that putting a haunt to rest often involves resolving a haunt's unfinished business. So basically what they do for 2nd edition haunts, if I'm understanding the trait correctly, again, because I do not as much stuff for 2nd edition nowadays. Actually, I do have to rent for 2nd edition. A haunt in 2nd edition is like a trap or another hazard that you encounter. But it will re-manifest and reset itself very different than a, let's say, trap or other kind of similar hazards. The other hazards will not reset themselves usually. They've got their own rules. This one specifically just says you got to resolve it. And it would probably be a kind of thing that your DM would kind of tell you how to resolve it more than, that. It's not something mentioned just in particularly the haunt rules themselves. If I'm explaining that a little correctly. So it's both the same thing, but also simpler in 2nd edition. They are very much more unique in their own thing, but they are very similar in 1st edition mechanically to just traps. Just supernatural traps. They made them very much more so, honestly, supernatural/magical traps, and they just reset after a period of time. That's it. I might have mentioned the reset time. Do they? Oh, they do! Reset 1 day for that one. They do mention under them. Cool. Nice. Not all of them, but most of them reset. Hey! There you go. That is probably all we have to kind of hit on haunts. I gotta be honest, I knew this one wasn't going to be a huge one to chat about. This was going to just be going over some basic rules and information on haunt and a little bit of that lore side that I do love diving into. But I definitely would recommend at least checking out the Occult Adventures information. And again, for just rules, PFSRD or Archives of Nethys are great for getting rules. Those are the places that I go to all the time before I reference a book when it comes to rules. If I need to dive into the book, most of the time they've got all the information. They're very good for providing. And I still do like pulling up the book here sometimes. But yeah, that's the basics of haunts. They're an interesting thing because there is a lore to them. There is a story behind them. They're very individual, like, this is something tragic happened here, something caused this haunting to occur. Now there is a haunt. It's not quite a ghost, it's a haunt. And as I showed, there's those two haunts which are very much so connected almost to ghostly figures. Those two figures, the Piper of Ilmarsh and the Father Charlatan, both of them did not have the ability to manifest as more powerful undead in the Haunting of Harrowstone, so they became haunts. And it's a very interesting idea that, yeah, that is kind of connected to, they doesn't mean they weren't powerful in life, they just didn't have as much connection to manifest differently after death. And it's a kind of interesting way of thinking about it. Greetings, you're here at the end. Anyway, I like haunts. Talking about haunts from Pathfinder. We're on our last topic for today. So haunts are something that it's basically supernatural trapped. That's the best way to describe it. It's one of those things is, if I want variety more than just I add a trap or a hazard to something, a haunt adds something because it adds a little bit of both tragedy to the area you're in and a little bit more of variety. Yeah, because they're supposed to reflect something tragic happened there that caused the haunt to form, that does add story to your region, much more than someone leaving a trap. And yeah, there's a lot of places you couldn't use haunts. It traditionally is a place where, something bad happened. Or someone died tragically. Something terrible happened. It's a spooky kind of idea that it's going to be a more spooky location. But it does add that essence of, this terrible thing happened here, and honestly speaking, if you want to get rid of it, you gotta learn about it. You've gotta communicate with the ghost somehow. You've gotta... It's adds storytelling and role-playing elements to a hazard a lot more than just, I make a save versus a trap. And I think that's why I like haunts a lot for using them in Pathfinder, either 1st or 2nd edition, because they add that it's a story element in and of itself. And yeah, like something from Haunting of Harrowstone, you don't necessarily have to get rid of every haunt, because there's an entire story for undoing the Haunting of Harrowstone to a degree, if you succeed the adventure. But it also shows that, like, if you have the opportunity, you can make a place more purified. Yeah, you can detective spooky stuff if it has an opportunity and it's appropriate to what you're doing. It's a part of the story that you can do. There's a lot of storytelling in the way haunts are presented, too. Because the way you can fight them and defeat them is a lot more... They're not like a monster, they're a trap, in a way. I think that's also, like, an interesting thing, too. And, you don't get it as much in 2nd edition. They simplified it a little bit. But I do like that story element that's still in there for haunts. Anyway, I think that'll be it for this. So I'm going to end out for the YouTube side of thing, and then I'll say bye to everybody on Twitch and stuff like that and give all my information. But for you on YouTube that have been joining me as I record this live on Twitch, thank you for joining. If you did join live on Twitch, a follow is always nice. Joining me on YouTube, things like a subscription, a like, ring the bell if you're not subscribed. Comments on if you've played in the Pathfinder RPG and used haunts or encountered really cool ones. I'd like to know some stories about that. And then, I do have Discord and Twitter for my social media. So you can always say check those out, twitter.com. But anyway, YouTube, until the next time I see all of you out there, stay spooky, enjoy Spooktober, and I bid all of you a farewell.